Have you ever wanted to take to the 2D skies and shoot down wave after wave of relentless enemy pilots? Good news for you, Capcom has got you covered with its breakout NES hit, 1942. Originally released as an arcade title in Japan, 1942 is a vertical scrolling shooter game that sees you take on Japanese pilots with the aim of reaching Tokyo and destroying the Japanese air fleet. The game enjoyed massive success in arcades, becoming the 5th highest grossing arcade machine of 1986 and eventually being ported to US arcades. Capcom saw this success and was quick to try and capitalise. The game was released across many consoles including the MSX, NEC PC 8801 and Sharp X1. The game also released on the Famicom and NES. This port was developed by Micronix, one of many Japanese specialty developers who sprung up in the mid-1980s to port arcade games. The NES version sold over 1 million copies, a breakout hit for Capcom, and spawned a series of sequels and future ports, including to consoles like the Xbox 360 and Game Boy Color. With all of this said, does 1942 soar into the skies of success or plummet into the ocean of disappointment? There are two things you'll take away from Capcom's 1942. The first is that 1942 can be quite difficult, like really difficult. While slower than the arcade version, enemies tend to throw themselves at you from all corners of the screen. You're piloting one plane, but at times you'll be taking on entire waves of enemies who show no mercy at all and zero regard for their own well-being. Planes come in various sizes, the small planes you'll see often, which come from all areas of the screen and will actively attack you. Medium-sized planes tend to take a few more bullets to go down and tend to block you as you're moving around the screen. Larger planes can be a nuisance as they perform both of these roles, blocking you and actively shooting at you, while also being bullet sponges. Luckily, there's enough variety in enemy ships to provide a visual flair and a fair challenge through most of the levels, lending the game an addictive if slightly frustrating challenge. The learning curve is steep and the price of failure is usually being booted back to the main menu, so learning these mechanics, grabbing various upgrades and mastering the game really is the difference between success and controller shattering madness. There are a number of power-ups and bonuses to help push you along and to make you even more formidable, or easier to hit. They appear sometimes when you shoot down enemies and can frustratingly blink out of existence with little warning. It's important to keep your eyes out for them. Unfortunately, like a fair few parts of this game, the power-up system sometimes doesn't work. You'll pick up the power icon and nothing happens, or your power-up only appears half as powerful as it should. It's kind of frustrating, and the game really doesn't explain why this happens. The other big takeaway from this game is the soundtrack, and by soundtrack I mean this game sounds like it's trying to attack a heart monitor machine. Enemies make noises when they explode, but for the most part you'll be cruising along to the beeps and squeals of the NES's sound chip, sounding like it's typing out Morse code. This may not sound like a problem, but extended play periods become irritatingly bogged down by this, and it brings the entire experience down a few levels. The beeps and bloops are not enticing at all, and are poorly realised versions of the arcade game's sounds. Graphics are also fairly basic. Enemies generally come in green and grey varieties, with the occasional orange thrown in for good measure, making some enemy types appear very similar. Occasionally when things get very hectic on screen, it becomes very difficult to follow everything that you need in order to stay alive. Following the planes that blend into the background, following the enemy fire that's hard to see at the best of times, added in with other technical issues that really kind of undo the feeling that this game's trying to create. What do I mean? Well, if you've been watching this review so far, you'll have noticed that sometimes there are very tiny graphical issues, like planes disappearing and enemy fire just magically coming in and out of existence. It also doesn't help that the planes are not consistent in the way that they move, having a very jittery effect as they move around the screen, making it very hard to predict where they're going to actually go sometimes. It's a very confusing situation for sure. At its core, 1942 is a fun game, with gameplay that shines through even now. There are a lot of caveats and issues though that may put a lot of people off this game. The slow pace, the graphical hitches, and the hilariously bad sound effects don't help, while the difficulty spikes will definitely frustrate a lot of people who try to go back and experience this one. This was one of Capcom's early hits, and it's one of the reasons that Capcom was able to go on and become such a massive presence in the gaming industry, but it's clear that this is a relic of its time, and many other games, including its own sequels, would come along and offer a much more fun experience for the player. As an early example of top-down shooters, it's interesting, but outside of 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay time, I doubt many will want to stick around, myself included. It's fun, it's frustrating, just make sure you play with the sound muted or you'll want to drive your plane straight into the ocean. So here we are for the playthrough of 1942 on the NES. This game is okay, I will say that quite openly. It's definitely one of those games that you've kind of got to tolerate its pitfalls if you want to enjoy the heights. Namely, that soundtrack is disgusting, and I didn't go into it too much in my review because I didn't want it to kind of come over that like I was completely kind of against the soundtrack, but there is no way like that this is just listen to it. The beeps, the squawks, it's something for sure. So basically what we have to do, we have to shoot these advancing planes here. We shot the orange ones there, and that means we got a power up. That increases the number of bullets that we can fire at once, which, you know, I'm fine with that. You mainly want to avoid the shots from the planes. As you can see, there's a big plane there. The problem with those is that they kind of take a few shots to get sort of through to, and you can see that the screen fills up pretty aggressively at points, so you kind of got to be aware of what's going on all around you. So that's a medium-sized plane there. So, what can we say about 1942 here? Well, it's certainly an interesting experience. The console port here has a number of issues, and I actually thought it was the way I was playing it, because obviously I'm playing these through emulator. Boo, hiss, I know. But I thought it was the emulator's fault that the graphics were being all jumpy like this, and then I kind of went and did some research and I found out that no, actually this happens on the actual console as well, because apparently they didn't code this very well. And as you can see, like, as they're approaching us, like, sometimes they'll disappear, sometimes they'll jutter, and sort of that gets really annoying when you've got like 7-8 planes on screen at once and they're all kind of moving in different directions. You kind of need to be able to see where they're going to kind of be able to, you know, deal with them. So that was the first level out of the way there. Obviously not too difficult, but again, it's very hard to go back and recommend this one because there are just too many things that you've kind of got to accept if you want to be able to, you know, enjoy this. It's fun in small bursts, but sitting here for any length of time, it just kind of gets a bit tedious. And it like I said, it's not helped by the performance issues, it's not helped by the soundtrack, it's not helped by the fact that it's not really that interesting to look at either. I mean, 90% of the time you're going to be looking at the ocean like this, and it's a fun gameplay loop, and I can see why this took off really big, but this is definitely the early days for it. Let's get rid of this big plane, because the problem is if we leave that on the screen, it's just going to move from side to side and flood the screen with bullets. So you can see there, that maneuver I just did there, the barrel roll, kind of lets you kind of get out of the tight spot if you're in it. Oh cool, what power up are we getting? So that's just blown up all the planes on screen for me, so not a hilariously useful power up, but you know, I will take it regardless. So that maneuver is kind of good if you get stuck in a real bind. If you find yourself sort of pinned into a corner and you really need to get out. You only get 3 at the start of each level though, so you've kind of got to ration how and when you use them. You can also see that kind of when these big planes appear, you have to move to them and destroy them, because if you don't, like, things just start getting really messy. Oh gosh. You've also got to be careful, because as the levels progress, more and more planes kind of start showing up from the bottom of the screen, and yeah, that's not good. Just look at the way the planes move across the sort of screen. They never move smoothly in this game. There's always like a bit of jutter and a bit of jank to them. It's certainly an interesting situation, for sure. And when you look at the arcade version of this, that didn't have that. That didn't have that problem at all. And obviously I know that's better hardware, but you'd imagine that they'd want to try... They could have fixed that. Especially with considering how 1943 plays on the NES. And we'll get to that, trust me. It's a fun one. That's actually, funnily enough, when going back and playing all these games, that's one of the early runners for me for games that I've really enjoyed, and I'm really glad I got to go back and play. This one, not so much. One tactic I found in these games is to sort of just spray as much as you can to the top of the screen, because as long as the game doesn't penalise you. Now, I'm going to stop there and talk about that. So we've just picked up the power-up where we get 2 like wingmen, but as you saw, one of them crashed into a enemy plane before we even got it, so we never got our hands on the 2 wingmen. We only got one of them. So yeah, the game can be mean like that. And what's worse is when you pick up another power-up like that, it doesn't give you the wingman back. So it's kind of mean. Like the power-up systems in this game are all over the place. Sometimes you get really useful ones, sometimes you get really janky ones, and sometimes they just don't work at all. Oh wow, this is getting a bit intense here, isn't it? The best tactic I found is just to spray and pray. Just sort of try to keep out of the way of anyone coming from beneath, and that's really all you can hope for. But yeah, listen to that soundtrack. That's gonna be following you to your dreams tonight. That's thanks. Yeah. Trust me, I've already had that nightmare. But it does. It's not a great soundtrack to this game, and it's very hard for me to kind of sit here and go, well, it gets better. It doesn't. This is about as good as it gets. So I think this is the 4th level we're on. We've got 4 lives. We haven't actually burnt up yet, which is pretty nice. Trust me, when I was practicing this, I was failing so fast and so hard on some of these levels. You really kind of have to pay attention. If you don't, then you can really get messed up. You also notice that we saw that grey plane come from the bottom there. Those are going to start showing up a lot more as we move through the game here. So what's the power up on this level? Oh, so it just blew up the planes again. That was not useful, let me tell you. These small planes aren't too much hassle if you can sort of get rid of them quickly, but if they start sort of like looping around the screen and sort of flying into your path constantly, they really do become a hazard. But sometimes, as you can see, they just fly off the screen, so it's not always worth going for these guys. Sometimes it's just worth letting them sort of do the thing and just get out of the way. Wow, we're really not getting much variety on this level, are we? We're just getting the grey kamikaze planes here. Really? We're not getting anything else in this level? I mean, I'm not complaining. So these small planes... Oh, okay. So that was a power-up. Oh, that's just giving us points. That's completely useless to me. So you are supposed to be getting as high a score as you can, but, you know, it's easy to forget about that when you're kind of shooting down planes relentlessly like this. You don't even get that much fanfare between levels. This is pretty much the game. Like, if you're hoping that like things might get better, the only thing that really changes is that the backdrops sort of get a bit more elaborate as you kind of move into the later levels. But other than that, like you're not really seeing much. Ooh, what's the power up? I don't know if that did anything. I imagine in 1985 this was really cool though, being able to play this at home without having to spend money on like putting quarters into a machine and such. Wow, this is getting busy. So you gotta be careful with the planes coming in behind you like that. Oof, goodness. I wonder what those people down below are looking up thinking, wow, busy day in the skies up there. The thing with the AI in this game, there really isn't AI. Oh, okay. So we get to we finally died here. So the game has little checkpoints that you can kind of get kicked back to. In this oh, well, in case you wanted to see it again, here it is. But yeah, the game has like checkpoints, so it doesn't kick you all the way back to the start of the level, but you do lose all your power-ups, which is very frustrating, because you end up having to fight these kind of big planes. Oh man. We were doing so well. We were doing so well. But you lose your power-ups, and you don't really get the chance to get them back unless like something was planned. So it's kind of nasty, this. Okay. Yeah, we're not going to survive here. We're not going to survive here with just this simple gun. But yeah, I gave this a 5 out of 10 in my review, and I think that's a fair reflection of where this game is in the scale of things. It's not awful. I have seen some people say it's an awful game, but although I might dock points for that one. That was a cheap one. I just think that in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a terrible game. It's not a great game. It falls into the middle, and the fact that like this would be improved upon, there's so many of these on the NES, clones of this, you know, and most of them do it better, you know, so yeah, I think we're not destined to be flying for much longer here. I think we may, yeah. You know what, I think this is a good place to show you what happens when you die. But yeah, that's 1942. It's fine. It's okay. It's aged not great. There are various reasons why that is. But honestly, if you want to go back and play it for 15 minutes, it can be fun. It's definitely a game that's important for history, but otherwise, just play 1943 instead.